and it's not too late for you to add your suggestions to the stack. And we're going to do the best that we can to not only meet them in these monthly sessions, but also to pass them on to our partners who are providing and designing PD for Missouri and Kansas audiences. So please feel free to do that. We're about to break out into our breakout sessions, and we're going to spend a little bit of time there, and then we will have a debriefing from that. So while you're in your breakouts, if you could select a spokesperson who would say, one tidbit of cheerfulness you have to share. And then we're going to welcome our presenters today. I'm so excited. Katie and Steve Schisler from A.D. Stoll Elementary, who are going to share a little bit about the model that they use at their school. 2 questions that I would love for you to focus on after you introduce yourself, of course, is what has been one unexpected benefit from working in a COVID environment? I have been collecting a small list of those little tiny blessings that were unanticipated in what otherwise is complete chaos and never things the way that you want them to be. There have been little unexpected bright spots. And so I hope that you can share that little spark of joy with each other. And then if you could share an arts integration success, and then also share who or what contributed to that success in your breakouts.
The first question was like those little blessings, those little exciting things that are happening amid COVID. It was a lot of pushed ourselves out of the normal. We had to really think different than what we have before. And we like to think of ourselves as creative already, but we had to get even more creative than what we've done. Really working that creativity train. The access to everyone has opened the door because of virtual, that anyone can come. That was in guidance to PD, that it no longer means you have to come face to face. We can meet you where you are. It really forced the need for becoming tech savvy, and the feedback that students can use all the different platforms that we have virtually, that we didn't know how many there really are that kids are used to using, and now we're utilizing those within our arts integration field. A couple celebrations that we had were someone used podcast where they had celebrations with parents and students and had that discussion during the quarantine time. We talked about puppetry through SEL work and how SEL has really been a focus for a lot of the school districts, and academics are secondary. And that has kind of been interesting to hear because you never hear that piece, but also that SEL really combines great with art, and it's happening just naturally because that is the way that people communicate, is through artwork and SEL, and it's natural, and it's not a forced object that anyone is saying you have to use art. It's just that's how we use it when we talk about our emotions and our feelings. So there we got it. Anything else, team, that I forgot? All right.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. Is there somebody in one of the other rooms who? Julie, Carrie, Maggie, Roxanne, anybody in your room?
Well, I can talk for our room. One of the things, and Carrie's the one that mentioned it first, she mentioned that now that she's on Zoom, what she teaches is out in 400 homes, and everyone is able to now see and enjoy what's happening in her classroom. And I thought that was so wonderful because we work so hard to make our learning visible, and now it's much more easily visible. And one of the things I mentioned with COVID is it's stretching my creative bubble. So I'm really having to think and turn everything on its head and find a new best way to do things. It's hard, but it's a good difficult. So that's what I appreciate. Anybody else in our group want to add anything?
Hearing none. How about the last group? Carol and Janelle, Roger. Anybody in that group want to share a little bit from your breakout?
Can we send our love and get well wishes to Carol? Carol is sick and she's trying to get better. So Carol, get well soon.
Carol who? I don't know Carol.
Carol Horst.
Oh, I missed the very beginning of the meeting. Was Carol going to be our presenter today?
She's our presenter next time on the
Okay.
November.
Okay.
So yes, we do hope you feel better for many reasons, not the least of which is next on November the 2nd when we're together again.
Thank you.
Well,
I appreciate you.
thank you everyone for sharing. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce our presenters for today. And we are ready to have you start screen sharing, or if you want to talk to us first, we have Katie and Stephen Schisler from A.D. Stoll School in Hannibal, Missouri.
Yay.
Yay!
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, sorry. But first, before we started, we did want to say a shout out to a couple of people that we see that has helped A.D. Stoll through our journey. Like we just saw Jenny today, Dr. Finisdale, and we'll talk about Locust Street a little bit today. And then also I saw Roxanne. Roxanne has helped us a great deal. And I guess Emily's not here today, your partner in crime, but she's helped us a lot. And then Julie Hale has given us a lot of support through the Missouri Arts Council. So we just wanted to shout out to those guys before we got started. As we go on, if you have questions, would you just go ahead and type them in the chat, and then we'll answer them at the end, if that's okay. And we'll just get started. I'll put a timer on so we don't go over time. All right. Take it away, Steve.
Alrighty. Yeah, so our story kind of begins with our administrator a few years back, Kyle Gibbs. He was really working on our building because when he came to our building, we were kind of
Balkanized?
Yeah, that was the terminology, balkanized. So like we got along in teams or factions or wings, right? Like or grade levels, but like we did not really function or trust each other very well as a building. And so he kind of started to build us up in terms of professional learning communities, trying to get that collaborative piece going on with us. And you know, it really was starting to make some headway with that. Another thing that kind of was part of that metamorphosis with our school was there was a district push as our school and one other school in the district were kind of on the poor side of town, and well, our enrollment has been kind of dropping over the last few years, and so without actually calling us a magnet school, so to speak, they wanted to give district schools an individual identity or specialization area so that maybe we could funnel more students into those schools, even though housing and other things in our area were kind of less than adequate. Kyle, though, was very comfortable with the idea of science and STEM, and though he liked and respected what we did in the arts, probably he wasn't super comfortable with leaning that direction for what our school was going to do. He was leaning heavily on a program called Project Lead the Way, which is really great, but again, it's particularly STEM focused and doesn't really give a lot of credence to the arts. And so with Katie and I think we were really looking for what role were we going to play in the future of our school, and how could we help?
And that's kind of where we came across at the time Lee Elementary, but now Locust Street Expressive Arts.
And that was through a connection with Katie's graduate program that she even found out about this school. And they were like so nice to let a group from our school come and observe.
Actually, I think they let 3 groups.
Okay.
We had a lot of people go.
We really utilized them a lot. That was in 2017. And so I went with a group of teachers and Kyle went as well. I have Dr. Ann Mayer's picture there because this was like our first interaction walking in the building. So you have to understand Kyle, very rigid guy and very,
He's not a touchy-feely person.
not a touchy-feely person at all. And the very first thing as we walk into the building, he's like, "Oh, where do we go? Where's the office?" And Dr. Mayer comes out and she's just like, "Kyle, thank you so much for coming," and like gives him this huge hug. And he's like all stiff and like, I mean, it was hilarious, but wonderful at the same time. And so then we were kind of whisked around the school to see different classes in action. The way I would probably describe the integration at that building was like just fluid. Like it was just everywhere. Like everywhere you went, there was integration going on. So we went to a music class where they were making travel brochures and listening to music from other countries. We went to Anne's art class and they were doing Van Gogh landscapes, but they were also talking about the scientific names for different types of clouds that they were putting in their landscapes. 5th graders were making graphic novels, illustrating an opera that they were studying. The kids were all very, articulate. If you went up to one of the students and asked them about their work, they were like super happy to share. The way the kids were working together in teams and groups was super impressive. So basically, like this experience was just like this aha light bulb moment. And for Kyle as well, who again, like he appreciates the arts, but doesn't really see what role they could play. And so I think he was completely blown away by what he saw at Lee. And even at lunch that day, he was just thinking, oh my gosh, how can we put this in the schedule? We have to get this in the schedule. And so that's kind of what led us to going the route of being a STEAM school. And so, knowing then that like seeing that school in action, understanding that the kids are expressing what they're learning through an art form and connecting different parts of the brain, and knowing what we know about Bloom's taxonomy and like creating is like the highest possible level of learning that you can do. I think he realized that, this was kind of the key. Like this was sort of, I think he was looking for like whatever the next step was in our school's evolution or what we were going to do. And this was kind of like that missing piece of the puzzle.
So we were willing to all come together, and this is what our afternoon schedule would look like for a quarter, for example. We had a PE teacher, a music and an art teacher, but we added a STEM teacher who taught primarily Project Lead the Way in the mornings. And then in the afternoon, we would do integration projects with grade levels. So as you can see here, we would be with each group for 30 minutes. We only had 16 classrooms at the time, which opened up more time. I mean, the fact that we were smaller was helpful to do this. And also, as you can see, we tried to keep grade levels together. So like, for example, this particular quarter, the STEM teacher was only working with 5th grade, but the art teacher was working with 2nd and 3rd and had a much fuller afternoon schedule. But basically we would go from room to room for 30 minutes working with that teacher. Also worked into the schedule was plan time. So once a week, the students had library. And during that library time, we would have time to sit down with the classroom teacher and work with them. We also would have time on our in-service days, sometimes as much as an hour and a half to 2 hours, to work with the entire grade level together to work on the sessions. And that was really our first year of doing it. And it worked pretty well. The collaborative part of it really stretched us as teachers. So the grade levels teachers would be meeting with the specialists, and we would create projects basically by putting our standards by each other and saying, well, I need to cover this. Well, I need to cover this, and how can we bring it together? And we have an amazing PE teacher who has a lot of engineering skills. So they did a lot of building things. And so that's our PE teacher there with the first grade teacher. So we were able to create a lot of really neat projects on all levels. And I will say that usually people will say to start with one integration project and, for a school. And we ended up, each of us had 8. So we did like, what is that? 32 integration projects, PBL in a year. It was pretty intense is how we started.
But again, that was Kyle for you. He was a great administrator. He's also a century runner. So like that means he would do these 100-mile runs, but he basically was a principal in the same way that he ran. Like it was like, well, if you're going to do it 100%, like you're all in. And which, I mean, in this particular case, this was pretty amazing. So another interesting part of this was just the fact that it's all co-teaching. So it's all collaborative. So not only is it collaborative in the planning, but the teachers and like classroom teachers and fine arts teachers, specialist teachers would be teaching at the same time. So we'd all be team teaching. And I felt like that was, I mean, just, you can't do anything more to build morale or build community at a building than have 2 teachers teaching in the same room. Like, I feel like I got to know the grade level teachers. I got to appreciate what they do and what standards they need to reach. And I feel like they had a new appreciation for what I did. And being used as a resource, normally as an art teacher, it's like, oh, can you help me draw this tree for a bulletin board? That's how I'm used as a resource. But now it's like, well, we're doing this unit about, or we need to cover animals and adaptations. Is there any projects you can think of that would sort of tie in, or how could we do that? And so like being utilized as a resource just felt really good. Like I felt more appreciated than I had ever been before. And so we would meet up, and Kyle gave us plenty of time for planning, which I think is key to this whole thing. And then we would team teach. We would do project-based lessons. And the other component that we often try to include is and also this was something we got from the Expressive Arts School in Columbia. We got the fact that oftentimes students wouldn't just create the artwork, they would also write artist statements about their artwork. And so I would always try to incorporate an element of writing into it as the students tried to express, well, why did they, like, what methods did they use to create the artwork, and why did they create it the way they did? And I think that it was very, it pushed the students to really be better writers through that.
Now let's look at some of the projects. We'll briefly.
So this is, this was Nick's classroom. So the STEM integration time. So a lot of his projects came from Project Lead the Way. So I'll just kind of talk from left to right, I guess.
Not too much.
I'll try to hurry. But anyway, so they did a robotics unit, which was very much like, they're kind of like Legos, but they had to create a robot that would perform a certain task. They did coding. Also, they did, I believe that one, they had to design a cast that would set an arm or a broken arm. Anyway, so they always have like missions that they have to accomplish as part of Project Lead the Way. For myself, for fine arts, the photographs that you see here are from a 4th grade unit, the one I mentioned about animals and adaptations. And so we were trying to like take one animal and then adapt it to another climate. And so they basically, when we laid out our objectives, you know, they're like, well, we need to talk about animals, adaptations, how animals adapt to their climates. And one of the things that I needed to talk about was textures and drawing simulated textures. It's real and simulated texture. And so like we went from that into, you know, creating an animal and then having to change it or morph it into an animal that would survive in another environment. And so we did a drawing and then we created a clay sculpture. The QR code that's on the screen, if you have another device handy, you can scan that. And we even did a claymation animation of an animal morphing or transforming to adapt to another environment. The little cityscape there was from, we even did a lesson on Jamestown and the history of the colonies. And we talked about community and what it takes to build a community or have a self-sustaining community. And then we used geometric solids to build buildings that we would like to have in our community. So it was basically a blank map of our community and adding in buildings and structures that we would like to see. And the other thing, we're running out of time, aren't we? So anyway, this also, I wanted to also incorporate community resources. So we tried to bring in people as often as possible to speak to the kids so that they had something tangible to walk away with. So on the far left there, a local gentleman who had collected Native American artifacts. The second grade was totally focused on different Native American groups from this region. So they were able to see that. Down at the bottom, we talked about, third grade talked about Missouri history. So we were talking about French fur trappers and traders. We were trying to figure out, well, why were these pelts worth so much? And so a local trapper came in and showed us these pelts, and they were actually able to feel them and experience what those were like. We created our own ink when we were doing a lesson about Lewis and Clark and talking about journaling, created our own quill pens and made our own ink. Also in the Lewis and Clark unit up there, we had a gentleman from Jane Surveying, which was, and he was excellent. He talked about the history of the surveying industry and how technology has changed it over the years. And then fifth grade did a whole unit about Japan and talking about writing. We were writing poetry, and we had someone come from the Gen J program up in Chicago, and she did a whole tea ceremony demonstration for us, and that's them drinking out of their tea bowls that we made in ceramics.
All right. And then for me, here's some of the projects we did for first grade. We put on our own production. We took our own version of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And as you can see in the picture down below, I think both of our productions were underwater. They involved sharks and coral and things like that. They just created this crazy story. It was fun. We also did one where we created our own instruments and studying the studying what the science of making an instrument and the creativity of it. With first grade, and first grade on the right, that's them playing instruments. They added instruments to their production, and they would perform it for our kindergartners. In the lower, you can see the kindergartners making a tableau. I think they were trying to recreate
Salvador Dali.
Yeah, they're creating a Salvador Dali painting. They had a lot of fun with that.
Melting clouds.
And then in the middle, upper middle, you can see these girls. We were doing a nursery rhyme unit, and we kind of integrated STEM stations in it. And they are finding ways to keep Mary's lamb at home. So they're creating little fences to keep their lambs at home to keep them safe. And so that's been a lot of fun. We also had people come in. As you can see, we have a local actor, storyteller, an educator, Gail Rubley, who came in to help them learn how to storytell. And we started with the basics of having them read books and be expressive as they read. And as it went on, they created their own stories that they shared. And then on the right, our 4th grade, we studied the Revolutionary War and loyalists and colonists. And they had to create their own advertising campaign to promote loyalists or to promote patriots. And they created their posters, but they also created jingles and they performed them for the class. And they did some really fun things and they had to perform them for everybody. They had a good time. And then in the middle, we have the third grade doing some dancing. We were talking a lot about, I guess, Civil War and some of the dances they would have done at that time. And it's really neat to go into a regular general classroom and push all the desks aside and do some dancing, and the teachers dance and everyone's a part of it. Also, I just wanted to give a real quick mention of our physical education teacher. One thing they're doing here is they're designing their own games. So they play so many games in PE and they create their own games, and then they tried them with the other students. And some of them, if they were good enough, coach would keep them in the rotation and maybe play them with other classes. But they used the whole creative process of where they would draw up ideas. They would try some things. It would fail. They would go back and change and adapt until it's something that was workable. So it really pushed them beyond their comfort zone. Also, he did a lot of things with simple machines, a lot of activities where they're working on their gross motor skills and fine motor skills, as well as working on their letters and reading and movement together. So we've done a lot of things. And really quickly, we were supposed to have another teacher with us, but she wasn't able to be here today. Miss Lorinda Mixer. We were able to do a project with all 3 of us on planetary landscapes. They looked at the geographical covering.
Yeah, there
of
were some NASA photographs of various formations on different planets, and including the Earth. And so then we talked about textures and how you could use pastels to show the color and the texture. And so they did dry pastel drawings of these different planets. And then after we finished the pastel drawings, then Katie worked with them using GarageBand and creating soundscapes that would also go along with their drawings.
And we also used iMovie, and you can use the QR codes, but I'm just going to play. They're very short.
Pine Glacier is mysterious.
So they were supposed to pick words that described the mood of their location, as well as just experiment with different sounds. And so we looked at music that would create different moods and what kind of mood we wanted to create in our movie. And so they made these little 30-second movies they're unlisted, so only they could find them. And we created QR codes that we posted at our fine arts night, so the parents could come and look at the artwork, and then they could click on the QR and see their little projects that they had made. And so it was a fun project to put on, and our classroom teacher Lorinda was just amazing. So we had a really good time. Finally, do you want to close it out?
Sure. So you know, we were talking to this earlier before everybody arrived in the room. You know, I mean, COVID has kind of put a lot of what you saw there on hold for a while. But we've got our schedule poised so that we can go right back to it. But it has kind of disrupted things in a little bit. But at least what we've discovered at least is that when administrators and teachers, the community members see what arts integration can do, like the reaction is always positive. So whenever our superintendent would see what we were doing, they were always wowed and awed at what we were working on. And so I need to see the screen again. Sorry. But you know, surprisingly, even with that, you know, like we discovered that our job advocating for our program is just like it's never over. Like sometimes we just have to keep on, you know, we have to keep on letting the community know what we're doing, like getting the word out about what we're doing, what we're trying to do here. So, you know, if you're a part of one of these programs, you just have to keep proving yourself and be vocal, be seen, be heard. We just, you know, I feel like if we keep at it, I think we can make this program work. It was kind of a bummer to be like, you know, just not quite, you know, 2 years into this program and then to have COVID happen. Because it was just amazing, like riding a wave as we were launching this thing. So we just hope that we can get back to it.
Yes. So thank you for taking the time to talk or listen to us. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But everything looks really frozen. Are you still there?
We are. We're
Okay.
all still here listening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Sorry.
Your screen is, your visual image doesn't show, and I keep trying to like see if I can turn on your video, and it doesn't let me. But we were able to see your screen really well.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Now I can see you. Great.
Okay.
So thank you so much for sharing. It was amazing and inspiring in so many ways. I would love to see or hear, I'm going to check the chat to see if anybody wrote any of their questions in there. And if you didn't get a chance, now would be a time to unmute yourself and speak your question. I'm looking to see if anybody put them in there. I don't see any.
Oh, how has your school changed with the new principal? It was difficult. We lost Kyle Gibbs after our first year of doing this project, and we lost him because he moved closer to home and he got a superintendent position. It wasn't like he wanted to leave, but I mean, how can you pass that up? So it's very difficult to pass on that vision to another person. And he's a great principal, but he still doesn't have the vision that Kyle did. But I would say of any administrator in our district, he's the closest to it. So we'll get him educated soon enough, and he'll love it too.
I would like to make a comment. This is Roger Kelly, and I'm with DESE. And I got to visit your school and your classrooms and talk with you a year ago when Julie Hale took me out on a trip to see some. And one of the things that I would share with everybody else in the group is that when I listen to this presentation today, it's really clear this happens when you can get a lot of people to work together in a lot of ways. And it takes a lot of, I think, crucial conversations of, I can make this work, I can't make this work, this pushes me, I'm out of my comfort zone, will you help me? I don't have time for that. I mean, there's a whole lot of listening that has to go on. But I also want to play a big compliment that when I left the building, I just immediately said to myself, this also happens because of the two of you that are really committed to saying, you're relentless of, we're not giving up on this just yet. And if there's something we can do that makes this better for our whole school, then we're going to do it. And so having your drive behind it, you guys, I want to make sure you both can look in that mirror and say, we do take this real seriously, and we work really hard because it shows and it's making a difference school-wide. So I congratulate you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I think Kyle would have created a STEM school if we weren't here, but we're way too loud and obnoxious to say, no, we have to put the A there, and it's going to be a very large A, very large A.
I think one of the advantages that you have in your situation is that you have each other. that
Mhm.
That's true
you
too.
have another arts advocate right there in the building who is like, yes, we're going to do this. And the other thing that I would like to share with our participants today is this didn't happen overnight. It was a process of, from what you and Kyle have described to me, it was a process of gaining buy-in from other members of your staff over, would you say, 2 years' time, and a book study and some other things like that?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would say that about that duration of time. Yeah.
And we had to build as a staff as well. We had a really strong PLC, and that helped immensely, and it just brought us to the next level. But if we had done it when our principal first came to us, we were very balkanized. We were just we didn't trust one another. We didn't respect each other like we should. Not to say that we didn't. It's a very, very, very good staff to work with, but we had to grow as people, and then it was the next step, and we've been able to grow in relationships with each other, and I think that's an amazing thing to see.
Katie,
Um,
Katie, do you think the work that you did in terms of learning to trust one another was first before you began the arts integration, or do you think the arts integration work helped you develop that culture of working together and trusting each other?
I think it's a mixture of both. Um, I think a lot of when I talked to colleagues that I said we're going to be doing this, they at first they were afraid for me. They thought it would marginalize what I did, and that people would not respect me. And they're like, "Oh, you mean you have to go to the classroom?" I'm like, "No, we get to work together," and it's built up this relationship between the specials teachers and the grade level teachers that didn't exist before. And yes, using the arts to be expressive and saying arts is not visual, and it's not just music, it's drama. It's everything. Every time you express yourself as a human being, you are creating art, whether you're speaking or writing. And going beyond, we are not just this category of, oh, it's nice to get to sing a song or draw a picture. It's so much more. And so our teachers have grown to understand that, and we've learned to express ourselves with each other better through it as well, I would say.
I think that's really true, that notion of trust and respect for each other, and the whole idea of being able to communicate with each other. And, it's relationship building, as you've said, and sometimes it's harder to build relationships than others. So I think the success of it is that when you do find a teacher who is really compatible with you in terms of having conversations and being co-teachers and letting it flow and letting it happen, and it just, all the magic just happens right there in the classroom, then they're the ones who are going to say to their peers, "Oh my gosh, you should have seen what happened today in my classroom," And so often you don't have to be the PR for yourself. It's that teacher that you have a really strong relationship with that will offer that PR, because it's scary for the classroom teachers to have to do things that they're not used to doing, and it's scary for specialists too. So there's an element of fear there. And so, but you guys, wow, you've done a really nice job, and that means that you just have really taken the time to build relationships with your teachers. And yeah, your presentation is wonderful. It makes me realize that at Locus, we need to put together something, that shows what we're doing, because
yes,
it needs to be celebrated more globally,
As you can see, your part was a big part of our presentation.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Really wonderful. You guys did, I learned a lot just by watching your presentation, and I learned new ideas. So, we need to share so we can help each other out. You guys did great.
Thank you.
And Ginny, that's a perfect segue, because that's why the Missouri Arts Integration Network exists. We are hoping to get people talking to people and inspiring each other. And for some places, like you said, building those relationships takes more time and effort. And it can be, if you're by yourself, it can be a lonely road. But if we can support each other through that and just get more of this happening, I think the world's going to be a better place. So Thank you. Thank you all so much. Katie, Stephen, thank you for presenting today. And please, anyone who is here, we are filling those spots for 2021 as we speak. So you feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat, just in case you don't have it. I think all of you do, but it's director@moaae.org. And we would love to feature your place, or just anything you want to share with us. We would love to have that. Are there any parting comments we would like to, Katie, Stephen, anything you would like to say before we wind things up today?
You gave us so much time. We feel like we shouldn't take any more. Thank you again. And thank you for this network. It really makes us feel like we're not alone in it. Being in rural Northeast Missouri, it's hard to find such amazing people like you. So this is exciting to be able to share with you.
Well, we are planning to continue this every month for at least the next year. We've got dates scheduled all the way through September. And I did put into the chat the handouts for today that can get you to all the dates and all the information that you might want to access moving forward. Katie and Stephen, if you don't mind putting your email address in the chat so people can reach out to you directly if they have further questions, or anyone else want to add their information, that is fine.
Did you send the slide presentation out to everyone?
I don't think I did, but I can. Would you like me
You're
to?
welcome to. And the last one has our contact information. The last slide will have our contact information.
Great. Do you mind copying the URL and putting it in the chat for everyone before they leave? And then I will also add it to the handout page after I get it back that way from you. So again, thanks everybody for coming, and to keep tuning in, guys. We're glad to see you. And I just hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.